So we gotta talk. There's a reason why games suck in the last, let's say, give it a generous 5 years. And it has to do with a much bigger problem that is not limited to just the gaming industry. It's a whole sector, a whole kind of structural issue. And it has to do with something called investors. You may have noticed that many games in the past have had a flourishing beginning. Assassin's Creed. Very great instance. And over time, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Well, the biggest change that can happen to a company as it levels up to the next state of existence in the business world is to be held up by the requests and opinions and business perspectives of investors. Granted, it's not the only problem in the industry of gaming. It's a huge problem in every single industry. We can look at some examples like the healthcare industry. The lawyers, more like liars. We can look at the law industry. An app store that is technically under some form of patent, but not the store itself. You see, it's not the store, it's not the method in which it's selling. It's the way that this store presents to you a list of objects to tap on. Digital, that's specific. So there's a patent for this, apparently, and there is a developer from X-Plane, a mobile app system in which you are learning how to fly a plane. Now, you'd wonder, does the patent have to do anything with the plane system? Maybe using other standardized tools to emulate a similar plane in order to fly it and learn the controls? No. It actually doesn't have to do anything with that app itself. It has to do with where the app was in one-way broadcast. Google App Store, even the iOS App Store, and Apple. There's a patent that essentially takes ownership over listing items digitally. Now, if you're a developer, or at least an aspiring developer, you know that one of the basic concepts in learning how to make a mobile app is just learning how to create a list, normally like a to-do list, in which you are entering data and check marking things that are done. Go to the store, clean up the house, feed the cat, etc., right? And you learn how to organize this in something that we call an array, or a dictionary, or a list, or a key value pair. There's many different methods. But the key point is that this particular list that we've created as a type of hello world in a much more advanced program to expand and learn how a system works is patented. Now, what does that actually mean? And how did it get patented? There are certain shell companies that exist. One being Unilock, that holds patents. In fact, what they naturally do is they don't create the patents. That would be too difficult. What they do is they wait for companies to fail, buy out the assets, and then stick these patents in a database for them to look at later. So, when in the essence of having a patent, what do you normally do with it? If you're a decent human being, you shouldn't really care that somebody's making a list of items on anything, digitally or not. However, if you're seeking profit, you are finding ways to go around the law and threaten companies that you seem weak enough not to be actually, too poor, one way to put it. And you are letting them know that they have just vandalized your patent. And they put you in court, give you a settlement amount of about $300,000, $400,000. Or you can fight it in a 2-3 year process, and it could cost you up to millions. So these shell companies that maybe have 2 employees, exist, in which they buy patents from failed companies and then seek out to sue anyone that uses this particular system. In fact, they have weird patents such as throwing a stick to your dog, or, get this one, swinging side to side instead of front to back. These are real patents, by the way. They own so many patents, it's ridiculous to even consider as legit. However, they function in Texas, and apparently the owners of these companies are lawyers themselves. Well, through a shell company, of course, so they're not connected legally or systematically to these people. However, they manage these firms. Now, the funny part is that these lawyers have fathers, as we all do. However, their fathers are special. They run some small town in East Texas, the local judicial court. They work essentially as judges. Their sons are lawyers. They themselves are judges, and these sons seek out patented or quote-unquote victimized patents in which you're using my patent, therefore you're harming my company, even though they don't actually produce anything. And then they give it to Pop in the court, and then Pop writes down whatever he needs to write down to prosecute these patent infringement cases, and then the company can start going forward with their harassment. These are called patent trolls, by the way, if there needs to be a term to recognize this process, because unlike internet trolls, this is profitable. There'll be more on this if you'd like to find out more in the description below. However, this is the first sign of this problem. And the problem specifically is greed. The second sign, we've seen it on the news already, and it is healthcare. The processes in which healthcare gets judged on individuals' cases is preceded by an algorithm that cares not for the individual rather than the symptoms and the particular scoring system that basically turns healthcare into a life lottery. And then third is, well, a little bit more political. And we've seen this happen with titles such as Concord. Now, you're watching a game made in China or developed in China with very lack of these sort of regulations. Marvel rivals. Amazing this game is. And it has none of the restrictions of these Americanized systems that we exist in. And I have to say, this game is absolutely phenomenal. From the development, from the graphics, from the story, from the gameplay and the mechanics, they just work and function as, well, a game that I used to play often. It's called Overwatch. And this was before Overwatch 2 came out. And for those of us that actually bought the game, to realize we're updating into a free-to-play version, where even the characters that play a huge role in the balance of the gameplay are pay to win, basically. That basically ruined Overwatch for a lot of people. Now, Marvel Rivals uses the same concept and works on top of it with even better gameplay features. What broke Overwatch, and more specifically, what broke Concord? Greed. Well, Concord didn't really have a good beginning in the first place to really use that greed to their advantage. We have to consider that their failure was a case for greed, in the type of greed where including a specific group of individuals and basing the game off of that specific group has the intention of attracting more people in the theoretical sense of things, without any concern of the deflection of other people that are not a part of that group. So we have to recall some time back where corporations became or started to be this sort of social justice fighter, where we would change icons and logos to all kinds of different social issues, whether it was a rainbow flag, and that's where it began. And then further down the road, this rainbow flag gained more and more and more color to it. So instead of a rainbow that would represent the spectrum of all aspects, all colors and creeds, ideas, and then stop right there, there were more colors layered on top to continuously label more groups that were or felt like they were not included in the rainbow of all spectrums. So the symbolic meaning of the rainbow really broke apart once corporations began to take over and market themselves on Twitter, on YouTube, and whatever other medium existed for corporations to do their marketing. But this was where corporations didn't really care about the person behind the social issue. They only cared about getting attention through marketing to get people to buy their crap. And this issue really did get worse and worse and worse over time. Now, we don't have a single rainbow flag that would symbolically represent a spectrum of everything, right? We don't need anything further from everything. The color spectrum would go to infinity if we had the technology to essentially observe it. We went from computing systems that had 8-bit, 16-bit, 64-bit, and then we had millions and millions of colors in between. How can you or an individual separate themselves from an existing spectrum of everything? Well, potentially, once the marketing for a specific group ends and they get their rights, like when gay marriage was standardized, which in all due respect should happen. Marriage should be on the consensus of the people in love, not on the law. So once they got their rights, well, this symbol didn't really mean that much. So why not just keep adding more labels on top of this rainbow flag? Just to keep including more people, trans rights, trans women in sports, I suppose. What else can we think of? Someone give me an idea. Oh, you're binary, you're non-binary, you're trinary? How many genders are there? Like, there's just such a mess of identification. And it's not that we're seeing people label themselves in order to understand themselves. We're seeing people label themselves to further away from the basic understanding of nature. And to that end, corporations will play into this part as long as there's money involved. And this is why you see now, with the change of administration, most corporations are dropping these techniques. So they never cared for anyone within those categories of social justice representation. They only fooled people into being on their side for the money. And is that really so hard to consider when there are lawyers that have no reason to be using patents like swinging on a swing sideways to sue someone, potentially, just given the ability to sue somebody? Of course, imagine you're the lawyer, you wouldn't care to sue somebody swinging on a swing. But if someone creates a technology of a similar nature, you would literally use that patent to sue them. Whether it is an actual swing that swings sideways and you found a really cool method to do it, I don't know, man. They will use language against you. And as long as they hold a patent, and as long as their fathers are in these judicial spaces, well, shit out of luck. So if there's these people that do this, wouldn't there also be other corporations that use people for their social justice issues? How have we not figured this out yet? All of our little social inconsistencies and problems that we have in society that literally breaks apart people from each other is just a method for someone somewhere to profit. And that's it. No wonder it didn't get the acceptance it should have. Because it was more focused on social issues rather than game design and gameplay. However, they all have this sort of similarity, and that's the free-to-play model. In order for a free-to-play model, let's say free-to-play or pay. In order for a free-to-play model to function profitably, it has to essentially incorporate some sort of profit. While Overwatch started throwing countless store items onto the loading process or the start screen, you don't really see it yet in Marvel Rivals. And this sort of absence may be temporary, but it does show a big play into the focus of what these particular games are trying to really present. One is Marvel Rivals, where you go straight into a simple menu and start playing a game that you are incentivized to play. The other, Overwatch, well, you get thrown with advertisements. Buy this new character, get a battle pass, get this, get that. Countless new season happening, events, and all kinds of just garbage. Thinking about what prioritizes a game, we've seen that these games that essentially exist now, in most cases, are replicating, stemmed from something like Fortnite. Fortnite was one of its first battle pass types, and it was successful in its mediocre way. Now every single game company, producer, they're aiming for this model. And if you build a system or a game based on that model first, it shows. It shows the lack of creativity. It shows the lack of gamer incentive to play the game. And it just basically shows what you made the game for. Just based on a login to a title screen. Do you go to the game or do you go to the store first? So while these different industries have their own individual special problems, they all stem from a simple concept called greed. Now, healthcare should be very considerate to the individuals that are essentially paying in to survive. We shouldn't really take too much care into the gaming development because games are games and we can choose to play them or not. We cannot choose whether we live or die. And in the healthcare environment, this sort of profit-first mentality causes quotas. And just like any product or business, quotas can ruin everything. whether it's quotas to deny a certain amount of people, or quotas to finish a game in a certain amount of time, or product for that matter. Any sort of quota can technically rush a process and overlook important pieces to the development of that product, and then basically ruin it in a very drastic measure. Now, as far as the law patent issue, this is far removed from any of these other two industries, because this is a purposeful system created to exploit patents, hunt down companies that are just big enough to pay you that $350,000. But one thing to ask is, why don't they just sue Google? The answer to that is simple. Google has a lot of money, or Apple for that matter, or any of the game store models that basically uses a list for you to feed off of and click on items on a list. And that's ridiculous to consider that that basic concept is patented. So we enter into an interesting awareness of these issues, and we tend to not really like them. We're seeing a lot of protests, whether it's Amazon. We're seeing a lot of violence, whether it is the murder of that healthcare insurance guy. And we're seeing a lot of response from the individuals that are essentially tired with the way the system was or has turned out to be. And I believe, personally, theoretically, that the system turned to this form because of the utmost garbage that we've created in the past. Over time, we've noticed products have shorter lifespans, even though the technology behind those products should be more advanced. Well, there's a cycle of refreshing your products to make more money for those corporations. While a 2020 phone might suffice just enough for anyone, most will continuously buy the new versions up to the current date in 2024, and every time a new one pops up. And there lies your problem. The incentive is not making a good product. The incentive is making more money. And many can theorize or conspiracize. Many can create a conspiracy, or even think of the basic principle of that conspiracy, that the incentive for a company to break an old device with an update is high if that person is going to simply upgrade to a new device. So we come at a crossroads where a lot of people are being more aware about these situations and these issues, and we are now starting to vote with our money. If, at least in the gaming environment, I believe most people will still fall for the upgraded technology, upgraded software, to a point where it's not really necessary anymore. And one can even say that the AI hype was just another layer on top, as now every single application we use has an AI assistant built in, including applications like Photoshop. This system is broken. Broken enough for people to start really realizing what its real intentions and focuses are. And it might have started simply from the insurance company CEO's death. Because in the end, that's very important. That's the life of people we know and care for. And granted, most of us have had issues with insurance companies. I know I have. My mother died of cancer and multiple sclerosis, and they found many ways to disqualify her for the best care possible, including the fact that she smoked THC to minimize the pain, instead of taking morphine and all the other disgusting drugs. It's nice for it to be open now, and we're seeing these patterns in corporations. And for the fact of the patent trolls, there is no contribution to society from them. There is zero contribution. In fact, it's negative contribution. These companies that have been affected are small companies that have had a good idea, and then they try to make it happen. And potentially, who knows, in the past, those might have worked, and we would be in a totally different future with technologies and products that we would have no imagination on, or we couldn't imagine. However, if you look at the pattern, if these companies fail because of these lawsuits, these horrid patent troll lawsuits, then the cycle continues, right? The bankruptcy happens, the assets are sold, they gobble up those assets with the money they've made from those particular cases, and now they have more victims to target. Now, one might argue that the law and the system is made for a specific reason, to protect patent holders from having, in one way, competition, but in another way, stolen ideas. One could say that if they produced anything on their patent list. But again, the shell company holds these patents with minimally 2 employees, maximum, I don't know. But they don't use these patents. They're being basically used as an arsenal, ready to attack someone. Some unlucky new startup company that has a great idea that will eventually be targeted. So we're starting to see a lot of these, and hopefully we continue to open our eyes a bit to how the corporate industry has become toxic for growth, innovation, and potentially why a game from China seems to be getting so much attention. They don't have the same corruption in the capitalistic society. In fact, they barely have a capitalistic society, but if it basically is on the same level of competition with the United States, why would China change that? They would like to see something bad happen. So, well, they'll let it happen until it becomes their own incentive to start micromanaging their products after they become the best in the world. And then they'll start doing the same issues from the government side, not from the free market side. In fact, I can't even argue a free market exists anymore because of these allowable and court-approved techniques to siphon the wealth of innovation and put it in the pockets of a father and a son that are connected through a court system and a law firm. It's almost ridiculous to think that actually happens, but it does. All the details for you to go through will be in the description below. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris, or Christoph. Subscribe, like, if you want to hear more about these kind of basically current day events. I do also programming, mathematics. I'm an educator, and there will be more information about me in the description. Thank you for watching, and until next time.